Good evening. Well, it's a good evening inside. But really it is a testimony also, not only to the infinite way, but it is a testimony to your own receptivity, that we can all be here this evening with as many handicaps as we seem to have. It is always a cause for rejoicing when we are presented with problems and are able to resolve them. One of my earliest experiences was in realizing how many people turn to truth purely for the purpose of finding a way to overcome their human problems, and who measure their spiritual progress by how many problems they do not have. And this is a false measuring rod. There undoubtedly comes a time when the complete absence of problems means spiritual demonstration, harmony attained. Jesus attained that after the crucifixion, after the resurrection. But I'm afraid too many of us are trying to attain it before the crucifixion and before the demonstration of resurrection, and it isn't going to be done. Let it be understood clearly that we will have to make our demonstration over the beliefs of what we call the human mind or the carnal mind before we attain complete liberation. Let me present it to you in this way. There was a time when I dreamed of having $100,000. And the reason I wanted it was that the income from it would make me independent, and then I could be a practitioner without any worry. The day I became a practitioner, I had just exactly $250 in the world. And no human way of getting any more. That has been my salvation, because when I speak to you now about demonstrating supply, I am not speaking from some textbook that I have read and passed an examination in. I'm speaking to you from the experience of having made the demonstration. When I speak to you about health, I am not speaking to you from the pages of a book that I have read. I'm speaking to you from the fact that in 1921, I was given 3 months to live by St. Luke's Hospital in New York City. And that many years later, I was given only a few hours to live. And so I have twice come back from the experience of the other side, and both times through spiritual demonstration. And so I speak to you of healing and of health from the standpoint of having demonstrated. What I haven't experienced myself, I have experienced in the lives of my patients and students, so that I may safely say to you that almost every problem of human existence has come to my experience, directly or indirectly, and that in a great measure these have been met. So it is that when we can prove that bad weather, strikes, and all of these other claims of human experience cannot separate us from our spiritual mission, then we have made a step forward, because now we can say, God must have done this. God must have brought me here. God must have demonstrated for us over adverse circumstances. Therefore, we have a greater degree of faith, a greater degree of confidence, a greater assurance that that same God is always with us. It is not that we are primarily interested in human demonstration, but that in order to demonstrate that the Word becomes flesh, it is necessary to prove in our experience that harmony is the normal and natural state of being, regardless of any human conditions that may claim power to interfere. However, at this point, we need to remind ourselves that we are not on the path of material demonstration, but of spiritual realization. And so I bring to you a question that came in, which will serve to illustrate this point. This says, I try so hard to show forth demonstrations for my relatives, for those around me, so that they will be convinced. Why can't they see? Well, of course, this is a hopeless task that the student is trying to accomplish. It's an impossible one. Even the master didn't succeed in that demonstration. And how can we? To begin with, what is the demonstration that we wish to make? The demonstration of the realization of God, the demonstration of spiritual harmony, the demonstration of spiritual life and truth and love, the demonstration of spiritual peace, inner peace, inner oneness with God, inner communion with God. Now, if your friends and relatives aren't on the spiritual path, how can you convince them? How could they see the demonstration even if you made it? Do you not see that a spiritual demonstration is only visible to those of spiritual apprehension, comprehension? Do you not see that in order to recognize the Christ, you must already have attained a measure of Christhood? Do you not know why it was that Peter alone could answer, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God," and the Master could answer, "Flesh and blood hath not shown you this. The Father within has revealed it to you." In other words, your brain, your thinking capacity, your intellect could never reveal to you that I am the Christ. That is something that only spiritual vision and spiritual intuition can bring to you. Therefore, Scripture says, if you raise them from the dead, they would not believe. And have you not seen it over and over and over again, that you have witnessed a wonderful spiritual healing, and someone has said, oh, nature would have taken care of that, or, oh, they probably weren't as sick as they thought they were, oh, the X-ray plates were wrong, there was some dust on them that looked like a cancer? Have you not heard those things? If not, you must have heard about them. No, those of you who are spiritual students may offer to your friends and relatives a cup of cold water. You may recommend to them that they try spiritual healing or spiritual teaching. You may offer them a pamphlet or a book, but you should not go further than that. In other words, we are living in an age where individual freedom is a most valuable asset. Probably it began, well, of course it began originally with the Greeks, centuries and centuries ago. This inner longing for freedom, this inner urge to be free. And it came to light again in the French Revolution. It came to light at the time of the Magna Carta. It came to light with the Constitution of the United States. What were all these things except man's drive to be free? Politically free, religiously free, economically free, socially free. And for the past 100 years, the drive has been in that direction. In the past 30 years, it has suffered a reversal which was predicted by the very men who brought forth the Constitution of the United States. They said that there was an element in freedom that could well destroy it, and it proved to be true. Man's inertia, his unwillingness to fight for freedom, to protect the freedom that he has. Oh, yes, when it's taken from him, he will die to regain it. But while he has it, he will be negligent of it. He either will not go to the polls to vote, or he will allow himself to be influenced by anyone with a strong mind, and thereby ultimately bring to pass that which we are witnessing in this age. Free countries losing their freedom. Free peoples losing their freedom or having it endangered. A member of the Supreme Court of the United States said last month on a television program that our liberties were being taken away from us today faster than we ever gained them to begin with. That is because we have not been alert. Now, I bring this to your attention for this reason. You wish the freedom to study a spiritual teaching, and you wish the freedom to study and practice any spiritual teaching that you choose. And you cherish the freedom to leave any teaching you choose and seek another. And this is all your right. But is it not your relatives' right to remain in their orthodoxy or in their materia medica if they so desire? And so just as you and I expect for ourselves complete freedom to live and to practice our spiritual teaching, so must we grant to our friends and relatives complete freedom to live the life they desire without interference from us. Now, of course, through love, if they saw us ill, they would recommend some favorite doctor or favorite remedy, and that is their right through love. And it is our right through love to offer them a spiritual teaching or spiritual help. But we should go no further than that. And above all, realize why you will never be able to convince anyone of spiritual demonstration. I have brought this out to you before, that it is claimed that only about 500 people actually witnessed the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Out of all the multitudes whom he healed, the multitudes he fed, and the multitudes he taught, only about 500 actually witnessed, if indeed there were that many, the resurrection. Why? Because the resurrection wasn't something that could be seen with physical eyes. The resurrection was something that had to be spiritually discerned. Notice how the Master, walking the earth after the resurrection, spoke to several people without them recognizing him at first. Why? Their eyes did not see him. And only when he touched them spiritually did they awaken to the fact that they were witnessing this great marvel. So it is. You cannot know spiritual truth with your mind. You can learn it with your mind by reading, studying, memorizing, but that is not really knowing it. The knowing takes place when the intellectual perception has gone a step further and has become spiritual vision. If it were not for this, this class would not be taking place, nor would the last New York and Chicago classes have been necessary. Because when we finished our work, 1956 and 1957, and concluded with the Halico classes, the message was on paper and on tape. And so far as intellectual knowledge is concerned, there is no further place to go in our work. But in spite of the fact that the message is there, and you have the tapes, and most of you have heard them, nevertheless, we are going to have to go through this work time again and time again and time again until that knowledge which is here up in the head becomes a knowledge in the heart, or spiritual discernment. Now, it is for this reason that all of my 1956 and 1957 work has been made available to you on tape. Somewhere in England are all the tapes of the 1956 and 1957 work, and they are still available to you, and I would strongly recommend that you make a much greater study of them in the next year or two than you have in the past year or two. And it is for this same reason that we are now going to make available to you the 1957 and 1958 work. No, it is you have the 1957, all of it. But the 1958 work, beginning with Australia, you are going to have all of the Australia work on tape. And you are going to have the 2 Chicago classes and the New York class. So that, and of course you will have this London class, so that you will have the complete 1958 work as a follow-up to the 1956 and 1957 work. And not only you are going to have it, but because of the work and the way things are arranged here in England, Manchester will have it and the suburbs of London will have it, and Australia and Africa will have it. Now, why are we so anxious that this be so? For one reason. It is absolutely necessary that you live with truth, not only until you know it thoroughly with your mind, but until it has become a part of your very consciousness, until it has become so much a part of you that it is instinctive. And therefore, when you are faced with any phase of discord, of inharmony, you will be able to say, do not repress it. Do not hold it back, not even that cough back there. Let it come, let it come. It isn't a power, it isn't going to disturb us, and it isn't going to harm you, unless you sit there trying to hold it back, believing that it is evil. It isn't evil, so let it come. Throw it at us. So eventually you must come to see the meaning of a spiritual message. Now, I've had the joy Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday of being in meditation in preparation for this work, and I have made this notation. The subject of it is God power. We have heard so much about the power of God in Scripture and religious literature that the belief became prevalent that God is actually a power to be used against evil. This resulted in the many forms of prayer in which the power of God is invoked against one's enemies or against disease. Throughout the world now, in churches, temples, synagogues, and mosques, you witness millions upon millions of people gathering weekly or daily to pray that the power of God come to earth in some manner to destroy national or religious enemies, to destroy disease or overcome fears. It is more or less universally believed that the power of God can be so evoked, that God is a power over conditions that we do not like, and that man, by prayer, can influence God to start the annihilation of these enemies. Let it first be understood that God is not a power to be used by man. Let it be clear to you that you cannot influence God to do something to your enemy or to your disease. That you cannot invoke God power at your will. That your prayers will not change God's will or God's purpose, God's activity, or God's laws. In this way, you will stop the vain attempt to reach God for some purpose, regardless of how good that purpose may seem to you. This is the most important lesson you will ever receive on the spiritual path. Because if you listen, if you heed, you will begin at once to turn from the Santa Claus concept of God to seek an understanding of the nature of God as God is. In the material sense of life, man is always using one power to conquer another power. The army of bows and arrows overcomes the armies of spears. Then the revolver-equipped army conquers that of the bows and arrows. The machine gun and rifle overcomes the revolver. The cannon destroys the rifle and the machine gun army. Bombs overcome them all. And now, what next? Pills, herbs, medicines destroy disease. Surgery removes bad parts of the body. Lights, hypnotism, psychology battles nerves, appetites, and neuroses. Note this, that in every department of material life, two forces are always opposing each other, good and evil, and always one power is used to overthrow another power. And very often one evil power is used to overthrow another evil power. When men discovered that they could not always rely on one power to destroy another, and when it was learned that a power which successfully combated another power today might not do so tomorrow, when it was realized finally that there are not enough material powers always at hand to destroy these erroneous powers, men sought for something else, something new, something different, something more powerful. And so this type of God and prayer came into being as we witness on earth today. But this God has not performed according to schedule. Prayer has not succeeded in bringing God down to earth to do man's will. Both this man created God, and the human means of reaching him through prayer have failed. The troubles of the world are multiplied even after 5,000 years of invoking deity to smite our enemies. The question is, when will men stop this nonsense and begin to know God, whom to know aright is life eternal? The answer is, when you, the truth students of this generation, begin to understand God and demonstrate God in your experience. As there was one Moses to free multitudes of Hebrews, one Jesus to found a Christian world based on the understanding of God, so today there must be a handful here and there on the earth courageous enough to turn away from old outworn concepts of God and prayer, bold enough to explore new paths leading to God realization. Now let us repeat. In the material sense of life, there are two opposing forces, good and evil, and there is a continuous reaching for more and greater power to overcome other powers. In the spiritual consciousness of life, this is not true. There are not two powers. There is just spiritual grace. The spiritual life has no conflicting forces or powers, no greater and no lesser. There is a divine grace governing God's creation. In spiritual wisdom, there is no God power to use, to overcome anything, to change anyone or any condition. The power of God is a spiritual grace, caring spiritually for God's children. Do you begin to understand why the Master taught, resist not evil, not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit. My peace give I unto thee, not as the world giveth, but my peace. Love thy enemies. Now we are in a world where there are not two powers or forces, where there are no conflicts, unless in your mind you create them again. Go and sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you. Do not permit your mind to entertain two powers or conflicting forces, lest your mind create enemies for you. In your spiritual awareness now, you will not pray to be healed of disease. You will not pray that God do something for you or for yours. You will rest in Him, in His grace. God's grace is ever with you. You need not seek it, strive for it, or even earn it or deserve it. It is where you are now. God's rain falls on the just and on the unjust. Neither do I condemn thee. Judge not, lest ye be judged. Rest back in this grace. Relax. Rest in the assurance that there are not two powers or two laws. Only God's law is. There are no other laws. There are only spiritual laws. There is no law of God to overcome material forces or powers. You live and move and have your being in spiritual life and love, and God's grace alone feeds, clothes, cares, sustains. Be assured of this. God is. And that prayer is the way of realization. But learn that God is not a power over other powers. God is. Learn that prayer is not a way of getting God to do our will. Prayer is a resting in His grace, a silent communion. Prayer is an attitude of listening through which God speaks to us or reveals His grace in our experience. Only as we surrender the paganistic concept of God as Santa Claus, or as an avenging presence, or as a superpower over the world, can we settle back in the assurance of His presence made tangible through grace. Release yourself from the belief of God as power into the awareness of God as love, flowing as grace. Now, after our classwork is finished, or perhaps when this fall begins again, go back to the very first reel of the first Halico class and see how for 2 hours this subject was brought to your attention, how for 2 hours without stopping it was brought to light that God is love. Not that by your prayers you are going to make God love you or care for you, but that God already is love. Now, you see, the way we have lost this God experience is that we have developed a material sense in which we have come either to love, hate, or fear that which is in the manifest realm, that which Paul calls the creature. He warns against loving the creature more than the Creator. But he could also have warned against fearing the creature more than trusting the Creator. You see, God never created anything empowered to destroy God's universe. Isn't that clear? God never created anything empowered to destroy God's universe. And I am God's universe, and so are you. Call no man on earth your father, for one is your Father, God. Therefore, you are children of God, spiritual offspring. Then how could there be anything ordained to destroy you, to make you sick or sinful or dead or poor? Now, actually, since God created all that was made, and all that God made is good, there is no such thing as a destructive power. There is no such thing as a destructive law. There is no such thing as a devil or Satan, because there never has existed anything except that which God created. Now, in the second chapter of Genesis, you find a second creation talked about. In the first one, which is the spiritual one, crops were in the ground before there were seeds. There was light before there was sun or moon in the sky. And man was given dominion over everything in the sky, the earth, and beneath the earth. But when you go to the second chapter of Genesis, you find a creation entirely different than the first. You find one in which there had to be material seeds. You find one in which there had to be a rib. And then there had to be a marriage. In other words, in the second chapter of Genesis, this world evolves out of a world that is already created. That is the basis of what we call communism today. There is so much of everything in the world and so many to divide it between, and no recognition is given to the fact that there is an invisible universe pouring itself out into visible form faster even than we can use up that which is being created. Spiritual wisdom reveals that we do not live by bread alone. We do not live by that which is already created. If this whole world disappeared in one smash, those of you who have learned that you do not live on yesterday's manna would find a whole new world springing up again in the very next minute after the crash. That has always been the way. Back in the beginning of the Depression in the United States, you have no idea of how many men jumped out of windows and shot themselves. Why? Because of the disappearance of their money in that panic. You would imagine that the printing presses were going to stop running, or that the intelligence that brought them their money wouldn't bring it back a second time. No, they had become so fascinated with form that when there wasn't any form to look at anymore, they were finished. The world was empty. But you see, those who had courage enough to stick around a while discovered that the same intelligence that made a man's living one time would make it another time, and that the cattle on 1,000 hills would be there this year, next year, and the year after. Crops would be in the ground. More oil would be discovered, more gold, more platinum, more uranium, and fortunes grew faster than they ever had before. So it is that I'm saying to you, in your spiritual life, you do not live on yesterday's manna, and you do not live on effect. Whether that effect is crops in the ground or fruit on trees or money in the bank, you do not live on that. You live by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. You live by every word of truth that you can receive in your consciousness. If all this world drifted away from you, if your money and your friends and your relatives disappeared in some hollow cast, if you had learned not to fear the creature or unduly love the creature, but if you had learned to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul, if you had learned to know that there is a spirit in man, you would not be fazed by any situation in the outer realm, but you would pick yourself up and start all over again, and you would rise to higher heights than you ever had before. Now you know that many times in the history of the world, civilizations have been wiped out. But always a remnant remains, a remnant to start the new dispensation. And always the new dispensation is a bit further advanced than the former ones. Oh yes, in perhaps every age there will be periods like our last 30 or 40 years when men seem to go backward. But they only seem to go backward for a very good purpose. That is, that they may lose some of their reliance on outer means, on material means, and develop a greater awareness of their spiritual capacities. One of the evidences of that is undoubtedly the experience that you are witnessing in France today. France, which is going through a terrific turmoil, but for what reason? Only so that the reliance which they've had in a false sense of government can be replaced with a higher sense of government. And sooner or later it will come. Whether or not it comes by de Gaulle, whether or not it comes in this particular year is not the point. Every single bit of their reliance on their form of government has been proven to be a bad reliance on something that could not stand up in an emergency, and it has to be changed. Therefore, we go through these terrific trials and ordeals. Every country on the face of the globe has had to go through the same experiences in order that some evil part of their government could be replaced with something higher and something better. Every one of us as individuals have either had to lose our health or our supply in order to be brought to our knees in humility, where we could say, material means have failed me, is there another way? And then God has revealed himself and said, yes, I in the midst of thee am mighty, why haven't you looked in that direction? So it is. Never doubt this. Every material prop is going to be taken away from mankind. And he isn't going to like it. Not any more than these men like losing their fortunes in the Depression. Not any more than you like going through the Blitz. Not any more than we like 10 years of depression. But remember this, it isn't a question of whether we like it. It is a question that in the end, every knee must bend to spiritual grace. In the end, everyone has to come to God. It is so ordained. We have come up from animals. We have come up from an animalistic state of consciousness, and we are progressing. We are progressing, as you can see in your art galleries, in your museums. Wherever you look, you will find that mankind is progressing, even though he has a 50-year or 100-year period of retrogression. And so it is that on this spiritual path, you and I are progressing. And I started out by saying that problems must needs be, because it is these very problems that take from us our reliance on material power, whether it's the material power of money, the material power of medicine, the material power of government. Each one of us must come to the acknowledgement of God as our government, God as our supply, God as our health, God as the very temple of our bodies. How are we going to do that if we go around enjoying good health and good supply? We just will learn to rest on our good health and our good supply, and we'll have no need of God. It is by our problems that we are made to realize that we need that which is greater than the creature, that is, that which has form. Now, in what way have we worshipped form, and in what way do we still place our reliance on form? And then you will begin to perceive why you must rise above the material sense of existence. Watch this. In the material sense of existence, there are two powers, and you are always searching for some great power with which to overcome this discord. In many cases, you made the same mistake when you came to the mental way of life or the mental sciences. You looked for some thought to hold on to overcome some error or discord. Always looking to one thing or thought to overcome another thing or thought, but not in spiritual wisdom, not in spiritual consciousness, and certainly not in spiritual healing. For in spiritual healing and spiritual living, you learn to relax and say, is there any power apart from God? Is there? Is there any power with which God has to contend? Is there any power that God must overcome? And if you persist in this contemplative form of meditation, ultimately you will say, I know not any. God is supreme, all, infinite. God is only. God is one. And beside God, there is no power. And beside God, there is no law. And beside God, there is no life. And beside God, there is no love. And when you come to that realization, you come to where I have been trying to lead you for some time, into the realm of grace. Into the realm of grace where there are no more battles. You do not battle people. You do not battle ideologies. You do not battle. You rest. You rest and you learn to commune with God and contemplate God and understand that you live by His grace. You rise out of that material sense of existence where there are two conflicting powers, health and disease, sin and purity, false appetite and harmony. You rise above that to where there is only one, and I am that one. I, in the midst of thee, am mighty. I am your bread and your wine and your water. I, in the midst of you, is the presence that goes before you to make the crooked places straight. Ye need not fight. The battle is not yours. Stand ye still. This is the state of grace that I am trying to reveal to you. The battle is not yours. God is the central theme of our existence, and God governs not by power, not by might, by his Spirit. And he doesn't overcome. We overcome the belief that there is something to be overcome. We rise above the fear of the creature, that which has form. Once it's in the form of a germ, infection, contagion. The next time it's in fear of a lack or limitation, or a strike, or a depression, or a war, or a bomb. As long as there are forms, you will be made to fear forms until you come to the realization form isn't power, creature isn't power. Don't worship the creature more than you worship your Creator. God alone, the Spirit within you, is the all-power, the only power, the divine power, and not a power over sin, disease, and death. In the presence of the power of God, there is no sin, disease, or death. In the presence of God, there is only life eternal. That's why we have been taught, if you know God aright, you have demonstrated life eternal, because you have understood God now as a divine, eternal, immortal state of grace, acting through grace, loving through grace, not by might, not by power, just by this gentle Spirit. No longer will you fear the sins of the past, your own or anyone else's. No longer will you fear physical might or mental powers, for you will live by grace. You will not live in an atmosphere where there is a continual warfare between one thing and another, not even a warfare between God and devil, but where God is so infinite and all that there is no devil. The devil is absorbed right into God's allness. And just in that way do the so-called sins and diseases of mankind become absorbed until there's nothing left visible but the body of God, eternal, immortal, forever and forever. If only we could demonstrate this, because we have learned it. But I say frankly to you that we can't. We can take this knowledge and we can use it and apply it each day as problems arise, until one of these days, bit by bit, the complete conviction of it dawns in us. And that all of a sudden, the creature isn't a dangerous form anymore, it's a companionable form. And we begin to see then that it was only Adam that named things good, and Adam named things evil, but in and of themselves, there never were any evil things, any evil beings, any evil persons. God constitutes individual being. God constitutes your being and my being. God constitutes his being and her being and its being, whether or not these others know about it. We do, and the response is to us in accordance with what we know. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Just remember this. If anything has form, even the minute form of an atom. Don't fear it. Don't fear anything that has form, not even a thought. For there isn't anything that can come nigh thy dwelling place, since in God consciousness there are not two powers. There is only one, nothing to be overcome, nothing to be destroyed, nothing to be changed, merely that our eyes be opened, that we may behold him as he is, and we will be satisfied with his likeness. Perhaps as you look around you with your eyes, you see erroneous forms, things that you call sin, disease, death, lack, limitation. But be assured of this, that once you have retreated from the belief in two powers, you will no longer behold an enemy. They will have destroyed themselves. They will have wiped themselves right off of the battlefield. The moment you are able to rest in that realization, why shall I fear any creature more than I should understand God, the creative principle of all creatures? Why should not I love and trust the creative principle of all creation? Why should I be made to fear that which has form? Did not God create all that was created? This is the atmosphere in which I want to leave you. And so at this moment, let us all meditate. And in this meditation, ponder the great world in which you live, in which there are no powers external to you. And the only power within you is the grace of God. You need not pray to it for anything. You need not tell it of your needs. It is infinite intelligence. It is divine love. It knoweth your need before you do, and it is its good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Rest in it. Rest in my grace. My grace is thy sufficiency in all things. Be a beholder and watch God's grace flow as you withdraw from the battle of life, as you withdraw from the struggle to overcome, to destroy, to change. As you settle back in the assurance, God's grace is my sufficiency in all things. I live not by might, nor by power, but by the Spirit of God. Rest back in me, and know that I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. Look unto me, the kingdom of God within you, and be saved. Thou shalt not fear what mortal man can do to you. Thou shalt not fear what mortal condition can do to you. God's grace is thy sufficiency. If you make your bed in hell, it will be there. If you make mistakes, it will be there. To the storm at sea, Jesus only said, "Peace, be still." He did not fight with the wind or waves. He did not try to overcome them. Peace, my peace give I unto thee. My peace. Thank you for this beautiful communion, and you will help the entire atmosphere of the class if you can possibly be here 15 minutes early and meditate. Because you must remember this: truth does not come out of books. Truth comes from the deep withinness. It is not only brought forth by one person, it is brought forth because two or more are gathered together in this name and in this nature. It takes all of us uniting in God consciousness to be such a stillness, such a peace, that out of the depths of our one consciousness, the one which we have attained, out of the depths of that can come deep messages. Just remember, the mind of man can't give or create a message like this. Nobody can learn it. It has to come from the depths, but you help to create that depth. That is why we have a teaching that says, where two or more are gathered together in unselfishness, in unselfedness, only for the purpose of receiving from God, not from man, from God, through man, yes, but from God. And so to bring all this to light, we need each other. Thank you.